This Notebook LM video explores how martyrdom became both a powerful symbol of faith and a source of deep controversy in early Christianity. While many believers saw it as the ultimate act of courage and imitation of Christ, others, including Gnostic groups, rejected the glorification of physical suffering, viewing it as a dangerous trap.
When you think about early Christianity, one image probably leaps to mind: the martyr. The faithful believer standing firm against the entire Roman Empire, choosing death over giving up their faith. It's this incredibly powerful story of heroism and sacrifice. But what if I told you that for the first few centuries, this was anything but a settled issue? That some Christians were literally running towards death, while others thought that was just a fool's errand? Okay, let's get into the surprising debate.
Right, so this is the image we all have in our heads. The martyr, totally resolute in the face of death, locking in their spot in heaven. And look, this idea became the absolute bedrock of the early church's identity. But how did this one specific ideal get so powerful, so central to the whole thing? And was it really the only way Christians thought about being persecuted?
We have to start here with this image of courage that has lasted for centuries. It became the ultimate model for what it meant to be a true Christian. A public, incredibly costly, and very final act of witness. But this powerful idea, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it was actively, and I mean systematically, constructed. Early church authorities looked at all this persecution not just as a threat, but as a huge opportunity. They developed this powerful theology all around martyrdom as a way to strengthen the community, inspire their followers, and even win over new converts.
This is such a brilliant line from the church father Tertullian. And you've got to understand, this wasn't just some poetic little phrase. It was a killer strategic argument. He was basically saying that the more the Romans came after them, the more the church would actually grow. Why? Because the courage of the martyrs was the best recruitment tool they could ever ask for. To really raise the stakes, the church leaders came up with this powerful concept, the baptism of blood. The idea was simple but profound. If you hadn't been baptized with water, or if you had sinned after your baptism, martyrdom was like a second baptism. It washed away every single sin, and here's the key, it guaranteed you immediate entry into paradise. It was the ultimate spiritual clean slate. No waiting. And this wasn't just some abstract theological idea. For some people, it was this passionate, deeply personal desire. Just listen to these words from Ignatius of Antioch. He wrote this while he was being dragged to Rome for his own execution. He's not afraid, he's ecstatic. He sees his own death as the way to literally be united with Christ, to become part of the Eucharist itself. I mean, that is an incredibly intense way to see the world. So the crucial thing to get is that this whole veneration thing wasn't just left to chance. Bishops created an entire system around it. They would pass around these dramatic stories of martyrs' trials and deaths. Think of them like the blockbuster movies of their day and read them aloud in church. They built special shrines over their tombs, turning them into holy sites. They celebrated the anniversary of a martyr's death not as a sad day, but as their heavenly birthday. And in a move that gave martyrs incredible power, they were even said to be able to forgive the sins of other people. It all tied back to this one central concept, the imitation of Christ. The logic was simple. Since Jesus himself suffered and died, martyrdom was the most perfect, most complete way a Christian could follow in his footsteps. It wasn't just a tragic end, it was the ultimate act of faith. But, and this is a big but, here's where the story gets really complicated. This intense encouragement of martyrdom created a problem that the church leaders totally did not see coming. I mean, think about it. If martyrdom is the greatest possible thing a Christian can do, why would you wait for the Romans to come find you? And the answer, for a kind of surprising number of people, was a hard no. A pretty radical phenomenon started to bubble up, one that would force the church to draw a very clear line in the sand. It became known as voluntary martyrdom. This wasn't about standing firm when you got caught. This was about actively provoking the authorities to arrest and kill you. You had people rushing into courtrooms shouting, "We are Christians," and basically demanding to be executed. The motivations here were all over the place. For some, it was just a desperate escape from poverty, or a quick way to erase a sinful past with that baptism of blood. For others, it was this fervent belief that the end of the world was coming, like any day now. And for some, it even became this kind of competitive holiness, a race to see who was the most faithful, the most willing to die for the cause, and get that crown of glory. Now, what's just fascinating is how fast the church leadership turned against this.
The very same people who had built up this whole cult of martyrs now had to slam on the brakes, hard. Clement of Alexandria called it irrational suicide. Church councils started passing rules denying proper funeral rites to these voluntary martyrs and even excommunicating them. Basically, they'd created a phenomenon that they could no longer control. So they had to make a really crucial distinction. The new official party line became this: true, acceptable martyrdom has to be passive. You endure it when you're arrested. But actively seeking it out, that's not faith, that's a sin. But while all of this drama was going on, there was another, completely different conversation happening among other groups of Christians. They looked at this whole obsession with physical death and suffering and came to a radically different conclusion. To them, glorifying physical death wasn't just misguided, it was a demonic trap. And to understand why they thought that, we need to look at a group known as the Gnostics and their completely different view of reality itself. The whole key to understanding the Gnostics is this one concept, gnosis, which just means knowledge. For them, salvation wasn't achieved through faith or sacraments or trying to imitate Christ's physical death. Nope, it was all about attaining a secret, inner, spiritual knowledge that awakens the divine spark inside you and lets it finally escape the prison of the physical world. And this really illustrates their whole worldview. Gnostics believed the material world wasn't created by the true good God, but by some kind of lesser, flawed, ignorant deity. So that means our physical bodies are basically tombs. Christ's suffering, in their view, was either an illusion or just totally irrelevant because the divine Christ could never really suffer in a material body. So why on earth would you glorify dying in that body? The whole point was to escape it, not celebrate it. This quote from a Gnostic text just captures their perspective perfectly. The true spiritual Christ was never actually on the cross. The Romans only persecuted a physical illusion, a shadow. So if you try to imitate that suffering, you're just imitating a shadow. You're missing the entire point of salvation, which is all about inner knowledge, not outer suffering. So what we end up with are two groups of people, both calling themselves Christians, with two completely irreconcilable views on the most fundamental questions of life, death, and how you get saved. Let's just break this down side by side. For the mainstream church, the body is a temple, Christ's death is real and redemptive, and martyrdom is the highest way to imitate that. Persecution is an opportunity for glory, okay? Now, for the Gnostics, the body is a prison. Christ's death was an illusion, and salvation comes only from inner knowledge. Persecution isn't an opportunity, it's a demonic trap to keep you focused on this worthless material world. You could not have two more opposed viewpoints. And that leaves us with a final, really crucial question. We've got one shared history, but two radically different paths emerge from it. We tend to remember only one of these stories, the heroic story of the martyr. So the question to really think about is, why did that narrative win? What did it offer that ultimately made it the version of Christianity that shaped the next 2,000 years?